It's don't do it again. I'm going to uproot the tree. I'm going to move it to where the United States is. You don't need to know about that.
Yeah.
And we'll call it even. But he didn't do that.
Yeah, the absurdity of it all, it was definitely one of the first movers for me and Adam. I know that. I mean, I just like thinking about one of the things for me was just thinking about like the kind of redundancy of human beings in the first place, because it was like, God made these perfect beings, the angels, to worship him day and night. But then for some reason, he kind of grew tired of his own creation and then dabbled in the playground of the earth to make these far less, perfect beings, and who, could defy him, could not. And he chooses to kind of meddle in their affairs or not. And it just, it seems so absurd to me and so unnecessary.
Speaking of what was the word you used? Lesser beings.
Yeah.
Steve, absurd. Welcome. I think you're searching for absurd.
Absurd.
Yeah.
Also welcome, Steve. Yeah, sorry.
Hey, nice to be here. Yeah, I'm an absurd lesser being. My transition story is not as eloquent as Kyle's. I didn't have that moment of epiphany where I said, I no longer believe. It was over several years, and I just kind of fell away. So I don't really have that much of a transition story. Although there was a few things though when Kyle talks about things that he didn't see in the Bible as a believer, right? I can kind of emphasize with that a little bit. When we did Bible studies, there seemed to be a lot of stuff they missed for some reason, but they didn't really go over very much. And I did go to Sunday school. I used to go to Sunday school before class in high school. I went to a Mormon church. But there was one story though that does stand out. It was Jephthah from the Book of Judges, where he was a general and he was led the Israelites against the Ammonites, and he made a vow to God saying that he would kill the first thing that walks through the door if he would win the battles and stuff like that. And the first thing when he got home from the battles happened to be his daughter. And I had never heard this story before. This was actually, literally sometime last year. Never heard this story before. I was like, that's not in the Bible.
And what did he do, Steve? What did he do?
Well, supposedly he killed her, but some say that he didn't. But either way, I'm thinking to myself still, though, I'm like, that doesn't sound like a God to me. What is that? How does that work? That I'm going to make a pact with God that for some reason I'm just going to arbitrarily say I'm going to kill the first thing that comes out of my door when I get home.
Yeah. Why would God make that agreement though?
I don't know.
Supposedly murder's on the top 10 list of things that you shouldn't do to other people. So why would God say, "Oh, you want to kill the first thing that walks in the door? Sure, I'll let you win the battle for that."
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
That's insane. That's insanity.
And ultimately, that's just one of many infinite stories in the Bible that just need constant explanation, right?
Sure.
I mean, like the Jephthah story, you were saying that, there are some apologists that come out and say, no, they really sent her away, to live, a life of chastity.
Right.
But in reality, if you read the story, he makes the vow, and ultimately it says he did as he vowed, right? Yeah. So did he kill her? Did he kill her or not? And so you have, an army of apologists that just make excuses for every one of these stories. And if you step back, you begin to realize, wait a second, how come there are excuses all throughout the Bible? Maybe it is just as it seems. Maybe it's as ridiculous as it seems. So
it is. I can tell you it is. It is absolutely ridiculous as it seems.
It wasn't like he had a stable home front either. I mean, his mother was a prostitute and he was a general, and so, it wasn't like he came from like a nobility or something like that.
It's just the thing it boils down to is if I'm God, right, and I created everybody here, I truly want them to spend eternity with me. Like that's a legitimate thing. I truly want them to spend eternity. I don't want to see them burn for eternity in hell. Why do I not create a book that is crystal clear, that doesn't result in thousands of denominations, other religions, like a book that says step number 1, X, step number 2, X, step number 3, X. And if you don't follow these steps, then you will go to hell. By the way, a place I also created, a place that since I'm God, I could turn off at any time. He could dial back that thermostat in hell anytime he wanted to. And if he can't, then he's not all powerful. So how can you continue to believe with those questions? I don't see how it's possible.
Wouldn't you rather, enjoy reading stories about, a man named Lot offering his virgin daughters to a mob. I mean, isn't that just more? Isn't that just more compelling at the end of the day? I mean,
absolutely.
Why have some sort of step-by-step guide when you can read about these ignorant, monstrous characters? I mean,
it's just your eternity. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
If all of it's true, though, let's say all of it is 100% true. Okay, is that really a guy that you want to spend forever bowing to and praising? Not me.
Well,
He's a monster. That's true.
Don't forget in Genesis, Lot's daughters, both of them supposedly got him drunk and took advantage of him one night to get impregnated.
Oh, great! No, I'd much rather hear about the incest. That's better than
a classic pastime.
Yeah,
because that happens all the time, right? I mean, that's just a frequent occurrence.
Yeah, I can't wait to become a father. It's going to be wonderful.
And it's honestly that continuous trope throughout the Bible of just sort of evil women that are just, attempting to seduce and destroy men, right? I mean, you see, apparently Lot was the only pure man. I forget if he was in, either Sodom and Gomorrah. I forget which town exactly, but but he was the only pure man. So of course his daughters raped this old man. Are you serious? Oh yeah, that's probably what happened.
They paint sex as such a bad thing, but if it's really so bad, why did God make it feel so good?
To tempt you, of course.
Like, seriously. So okay, good. I'm glad that you said that answer, because that means who is the biggest trickster in this story?
Yeah, at least Satan's straightforward. He tells you what he's going to do. Yeah,
right.
Well, there are some narratives that Satan, the Satan, isn't some evil being. It's just the basically like a prosecuting attorney, and that he's actually the most truthful one because he's telling it the way it is. This is some narrative, that some Satanist type use too. But he doesn't lie. And that's like the greatest way to deceive is to sometimes tell the truth.
It's true.
His character pretty much became more solidified in Revelation, right? Because in the Old Testament he acts as the tempter with Job and even in the New Testament with Jesus, but at the end of the New Testament his character is really solidified as this demon-like character, and that's the only one they seem to see him as. So
is it rational and is it rational to think that because you were made fun of for having a bald head, and you asked God to help you out with that, you went cry like a crybaby to God and said, "These kids were making fun of me for having a bald head." Is it rational that God would then say, "You're right, that should never happen," and send a herd of bears to tear these people apart just for making fun of your bald head? Is that somebody that you want to praise for eternity? No.
My favorite apologetic for that is, quote, they weren't kids, they were teens. Like, that makes it any better.
Oh, yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I've seen those videos too where they're like, there were some unruly teens that seemed to be, verbally accosting him, and I'm like, okay, where are you getting this from the passage? Like, are you? It seems like you're adding this, and you're just ashamed of the story.
Do you know what else they did that for? You know what else they did that for? The Catholic Church says that Bill Donahue, the director of the Catholic League, said that very same thing. Steve, did he not, about these sexual assaults? He said, "Well, they're talking like it's child rape. These kids were adolescent."
Yep.
Like
that's appalling.
Yep. Yes. He was trying to negate the whole thing of, it wasn't really child molestation. It was more adolescent molestation.
Like that makes it okay. Yeah.
I've heard a similar argument on the atheist experience, and they were kind of diving down the inevitable rabbit hole that if God is omnipresent, he is there watching children being raped. He's there in the moment watching and observing children being raped. And the caller kind of responded, was like, "Well, you act as that little kid's innocent." And they're like,
"Oh, I remember that now."
I've seen that as well.
Yeah, are you serious? Like that's your best response?
I've heard that apologetic before, but here's a contradiction that I find, though. If God is everywhere, right, omniscient and all-knowing, and it happens to be omnipresent everywhere, but how at the same time he's out of time? Because
what do you mean by that?
Well, a lot of narrative, for example, there's a position called theistic personalism, which is similar to classical theism, is where God acts as this great demure of the universe, that he basically sustains the universe from some outside perspective, kind of looking in, right? Instead of being one with the universe where he's pervasive everywhere, he's kind of outside space-time looking in. So time is not a concept to him, right?
Okay.
Which I'm not quite sure how that works, but let's go with it. But at the same time, he's omnipresent in the universe, but at the same time, he's outside time. That actually is a contradiction. Yeah.
I mean, there's another kind of variant of that objection, which is like, how could there be, because we're sort of talking about like how could God punish us for things that like he set up for us to do, and a lot of objections will be like, well, God gave us free will, so it's a choice whether or not we choose to follow him. But what I've never understood about that is that if God is omnipotent, so he can do anything, and he's omniscient, so he's everywhere, and he exists across all times, like he's seen what's going to happen already, well then he by definition, by your own definitions that you've given him, he has the power to create any circumstances over the duration of your entire life that he wants. Absolutely. So he created the circumstances of your birth, the course of your life, and your death. So he knows already before you're created what you'll do. So I don't know how free will can blossom out of that.
Think about another thing, though. Is it really free will if he's allowing you to have it? Like
sort of, yes.
Is it really free will?
It is. Well, it is free will. That's free will is be able to decide without undue influence. But we don't have libertarian free will. But here's the funniest thing is that apologetics will run something called Molinism. S.J. Thompson is very famous for running Molinism. Although no offense to S.J., I love her to death. She doesn't understand Molinism. She throws it out there as like a defense of something, right? Well, because Molinism. Well, what's Molinism? Oh, I don't know, but it sounds good. But basically, it's an intermediate position that William Lane Craig argues that God, he knows everything, but he limits himself such that what he does is he says this: okay, I know what Kyle's going to do given two situations. If he's put in situation X, he's going to do A. If he's put in Y, he's going to do B. I want B to manifest. So what he does, God creates a modal possible world that actualizes, that puts Kyle in the B, Y, not A, so he does B. So Kyle still has a choice.
That's so dumb.
It doesn't resolve It doesn't resolve everything. Trust me.
Where did they get that from, though? Like where in the book does that? There are so many people reaching for answers to this stuff that has no basis in the literature. They go with it because it sounds good. Well, okay, that's a possibility, so let's go with it. And people buy it hook, line, and sinker because for some reason it's in us that there has to be something to this. Like this, none of this could happen by a chain of unplanned events that led to where we are today. This has to be something that is put in motion by a grand architect, and it's just you have to divorce yourself from that and look at what the book actually says. If you're going to profess to follow the book, read it, all of it. And if you read the Bible from cover to cover, 9 times out of 10, I will bet you will be an atheist by the time it's over. If you can come out and be a Christian, then you're just you're turning a blind eye to a lot of things in that book.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was, one thing that Adam and I explored incessantly when we were just kind of leaving the church was the fact that, it has to be less than 10% of the Bible is ever discussed in a church sermon.
Right.
Where it's just, it is sort of weird that you'll notice that they'll kind of do at least in my church, we used to do these sort of projects of several sermons that were like a series of a book, but it would be always a very short book in the New Testament. And I always kind of wondered, why don't we ever do that with like Deuteronomy or Leviticus or even other books in the New Testament? Like what's that one book one verse in 2 Timothy? A man cannot be taught anything by a woman, something like that. Like it's just like a piece of pristine wisdom from God or something like that.
Here's what you have to this is what I take away from it. If you read something in the book where it's like for me and my story, it was the slavery issue. If you read that and then you go to someone in the church and you tell them or ask them, how can this be? How can God seemingly be okay with slavery, the answer that you'll usually get is that something like this: oh, it's not the same kind of slavery. Oh, it's indentured servitude. Or you'll